Welcome to Edge of Intelligence, where strategy meets smarter systems. I'm Carl Owen, fractional CIO and AI advisor at Protelligent. On this show, we sit down with founders and executives at the forefront of AI, automation, and digital transformation. Today, I'm joined by James Mills, Brokerage Director at Brokerage Solutions. James brings over 2 decades of experience in financial services with deep expertise in wealth management, annuities, and strategic business growth. He's worked with independent advisors, financial institutions, and insurance professionals to streamline operations, strengthen client relationships, and scale revenue. James, welcome to the show.
Hey, looking forward to it, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, no problem. I've been looking forward to this conversation. The financial services space is going through a huge shift in how tech and talent intersect at this point. You've had a long career in financial services. What were the key gaps or opportunities you all saw that inspired you to shape Brokerage Solutions into what it is today?
No, it's a great question. And I appreciate, again, the chance to have this conversation because to answer it, man, the financial services industry, what is so funny to me is how large the industry overall is. And yet we're always using such antiquated systems where I know a bunch of my clients, and again, I work with small business owners, I work with retail clients where I'm having and helping them with their investment services, but the bulk of my time is spent, to your point, with financial professionals, with RIAs, insurance agents, people who might work at the bank. I do a lot of business with them. And so many of those guys are working with DOS. Like you come on and they have the old screen, and it just blows my mind that for an industry that shapes itself and has the connotation that we're so cutting edge, most of it's being held by a shoestring and toothpicks, and so that's something that we coach a lot, and one of the reasons why we've kind of built our company around it is by leveraging and helping people say, all right, well, you need specific technologies not only to have more in-depth conversations with your clients, and that's where we come into play, is to help coach and leverage technology to say, hey, Mr., Mrs. Financial Professional, here's what you should be doing on the planning side with your client to go deeper and have better conversations. But the flip side is how can you do this in a way that's going to help you scale your practice through prospecting or through touch points with your clients or through all the variety of admin stuff that technology is implementing. And so that's been some of the key gaps that we're capitalizing on, is that if you don't adapt, you die. And so being able to coach people on technology and how to leverage it in a variety of capacities is kind of where we've made our bread and butter.
Well, one of the things I've noticed about the most successful financial services firms is that they don't just sell products. To your point, they engineer processes that help advisors serve clients more effectively. That's where operational discipline meets relationship-driven growth for the most part.
Oh, 100%. It's interesting too, because I'm in the middle of writing a book exactly around this, catered towards, the financial professional, and having that exact conversation of, most people got into the industry probably as an insurance agent, and insurance agent relationships are great. I have a lot of insurance relationships that I talk to right now, insurance agent relationships. It's a great way to learn the business, and it's a great way to learn the work ethic and dial for dollars, and you got to actually make the phone calls. But what I've often found in that type of a relationship is it's so transactional that you're typically waiting on the commission of your next client. So you're kind of looking at the dollar tag when you're in that conversation with the person. And yet nobody likes to be sold. And so where I see the industry kind of heading is exactly where you're talking, is the more holistic planning approach of, hey, I'm going to meet you exactly where you need to be met. I want to hear about your objectives. I want to hear about what your next milestone is going to be, and let's kind of manufacture your overall portfolio around that. And so I love that insight, because I think if I could point to 2 big factors that are probably going to contribute to a financial professional's growth in the future, or 3 main factors, and we can kind of dive all the way into it if you want. But the 3 main factors is: 1, are you leveraging technology to help you scale? 2, are you engaging in that holistic planning approach and not just like the transactional approach and pushing product, but now pushing solutions and uncovering all the client situation? And then 3, and this is something not necessarily catered towards our conversation today, is engaging the next generation, because we have this great wealth transfer that everyone keeps talking about, where when the baby boomers, God forbid, when they start to pass away, you're going to have this transfer to Gen X and to millennials. And number one, are you actually actively having conversations with them? But two, are you speaking their language in the way they need to be met, right? Like
Hmm.
me as a millennial, if I was in the financial services sector, I would want someone who is leveraging AI. I don't want someone who is just talking to me about, their most recent second house they purchased or their boat or anything like that. Like, yeah, cool. That's good for you, buddy. But like, how are you actually engaging me and providing value? And that's so much of what we talk to, right? How do you provide that value? How do you leverage that AI? And ultimately, like I said, is how do you actually have the conversation? That's where I kind of nerd out in those conversations, but also where I love to spend my time in conversation with the people that I work with.
Hmm. Well, for those who may not know Brokerage Solutions, can you talk us through your core services and the unique value that you bring to advisors and institutions?
Yeah, of course. So what Brokerage Solutions is we're what's known as a brokerage general agency. You also might have heard of the term IMO, an insurance marketing organization. Essentially what we do is we work with a financial professional to help them reduce the hassle of needing to know life insurance and annuities and long-term care and disability because we have a network of over 40 to 50 insurance carriers that we might be working with. And so I can really come in and be a case designer for the financial professional that we might be working with or talking to. But on the flip side is there's a million of us in this type of an industry. There's so many people who are trying to also reduce the hassle and be more effective on case design and all this other stuff. And so where we also kind of win is advanced planning. I like to spend a lot of my time researching on case design, how to help your clients a little bit better when it comes to the actual planning side and what they should be in and how to mitigate tax consequence, how to maximize where their money's going. But again, that's a conversation that the bulk of the industry is already having. And so the other areas that we're finding quite a bit of success in is in the practice management side, where I can help you scale your practice, either helping you grow and find leads and prospect better. Or on the flip side is the conversation around becoming more efficient through different systems and processes that you can put in place. And I funnily enough, before this podcast interview today, I was actually working on that part of my book, talking about how do you build systems that outlast you. The next thing is we do a lot when it comes to our tech stack. So we leverage partnerships with places like Vanilla or Income Lab or Water Lily or Holistaplan, and to very briefly kind of highlight some of those. With Vanilla, they're an estate planning document creation software that, if you, Carl, if you wanted to build out a power of attorney or a living will or a trust, just a basic trust, that software is something that we're giving access to our agents for, that they can actually go in and make that power of attorney for you. And when I work with end clients, which realistically isn't all that often, I'm doing that for my clients, right? And when you talk about Income Lab, that is a great tool that I can actually collect the information and say, all right, well, here's what your assets look like. You have this in a traditional IRA. You
Mhm.
might have this in a brokerage account. You have this insurance. You have this and that and that. And it can actually model out what your withdrawals will look like when it's time to retire. And you can model that based on different market conditions and stuff like that as well. So it's a great tool for the income conversation. When you talk about Water Lily, what's great about that is you can send out some questions to your client as an advisor, and the client will get questions like, "Hey, tell us if you smoke, and tell us about your parents, their health conditions. What zip code are you in? How much do you make?" And a lot of those factors are great at helping us to model if you'll need long-term care and how much that's going to cost. So if you're in a nursing home when you're 80, hey, by that point it's going to cost you $100,000 a year. And so we can actually overlay different solutions and say, all right, well, here's how you can pay for that. And then the last thing is this Holistaplan is a fantastic tool we've been using to actually, it's not going to replace the traditional accountant, but it's a way where we can actually import your last year's tax returns and say, all right, based on this situation, here's a better way to optimize your portfolio this year to, again, minimize the tax implication and maximize the returns that you're getting. And so it'll actually give you, hey, you might want to do a Roth conversion, or hey, you might want to do some charitable donations or different stuff like that modeled to the client's portfolio. And so um, that's some of the stuff that we've really been leveraging. And then the last thing is again, the lead aspect of we're working on building our own CRM that will have over 30,000 leads for the agent. And so to kind of put it more simply, again, what the industry does is we try to reduce the hassle of knowing all the different products, and we try to be your case design consultant, right? But what we're doing differently is that I can help you scale your practice or become more efficient through practice management. We have a bunch of tech that we can leverage, and then we can actively help you with lead generation. And so, not to be so long-winded, but there's a lot of ways we can help, to the point where when I jump into a conversation with someone, it's just, hey, what's the best use of your time, and then you just kind of uncover where the conversation goes from there. So,
Well, you operate in a space that's both high touch and highly regulated. How do you balance the compliance requirements with the need for agility?
that's a great question. There's so much in terms of the legal, any of the regulations that come out. It's so hard to navigate in those conversations. And so, number one, it's great to have a good legal team. And, it's ChatGPT's been my best friend in that regard. But ultimately, at the end of the day, man, it's more of just watching where you step, I think is the most important aspect. It's just be conscious of what you're doing. And if it kind of feels a little shady, probably don't do it. Like one of the things that they're really cracking down on right now is texting. I'm not allowed to text an end client. I can't text my clients either. And if we do, we'll get slapped with a big old fine. And it's like, well, that makes sense. Maybe I shouldn't be trying to text you regarding here's how your portfolio's doing. They're not cracking down on, hey, Carl, I'm running late to this meeting. Grab me a table. That's not, if you're actively having that conversation through text of here's what you should be doing with your finances, that probably would have been better through a phone call. And so that's some of the stuff that I just kind of highlight is just be mindful of where you're stepping. And if there's any question, just err on the side of caution and do as much due diligence as you can before you actually do anything.
Well, where have you seen the most dramatic shifts in advisor expectations over the last few years?
It's a great question. Do you mean expectation from the end client or expectation from the advisor to like someone like me?
From the advisors.
From the advisor like me, to a company like me, I think the biggest shift that we've seen is that a lot of advisors are starting to get away from the insurance part of the business, and they're more advertising themselves as like fee only. And the reason I think behind that is the fact that so many insurance agents who, like the Northwestern Mutual, the New York Life, right, like the career shops, they've historically missold insurance in general. And so there's been this connotation behind like annuities and life insurance and stuff that like, oh, we're going to try to fit a circle in a square hole, and it's something that, like, again, at the end of the day, there's always that insurance need or that conversation for risk mitigation in someone's portfolio. And so that's been something that we've been having to kind of look at when it comes to the advisor conversation. But the flip side is they're zoomed out, really. So like over the last 5 years, of course, every industry has started to move towards this idea of, hey, Zoom's great, do virtual meetings. And yet, most people are still inclined to say, I would rather have a relationship with someone I've met in person. And so that's been something that has been an interesting thing to navigate, is that even though we're starting to see people moving towards a more virtual setting and more ease in technology. And again, everyone's saying that they want to start implementing more technology. We're also kind of seeing on the same flip side this idea of shifting back to the analog side of the business, which is it's such a relationship heavy business, not only with me and my advisor, but my advisor with his client, that it's how do you leverage the technologies that we're developing and the technologies that we're wanting to use without necessarily losing the human touch, and I think that's, you need to still maintain the relationship, but there's also this idea of how can I maintain this relationship and still have it come from me while still leveraging some of these technologies to a degree that, hey, I can get rid of most of my admin work, or I can automate some of my proactive outreach if I can. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that gets me to my next question. How do you ensure your platform or services align with an increasing tech savvy advisor base while still supporting those who are less digitally native?
No, that's a great question. So much of it goes back into knowing who the client is and who the advisor is at the end of the day. Whenever I'm in a conversation with someone, my first question, as I kind of mentioned a minute ago, is what's the best use of your time, and you'll find that some clients, some advisors want to talk more about the technology gap that I might have versus some people might lean more into like the relationship side of, all right, well, how do you have conversations with my client? And so it's hard to navigate between those two, but as long as you can kind of highlight with them and say, all right, well, here's the areas that I can potentially help you, right? I can help you with navigating the human element of knowing the sales conversation and the psychology behind some of the conversations we're having. Or I can help you with, here's our tech stack and here's how you can kind of leverage that. And so it all depends on the conversation. And I know we'll get into this a little bit more here in a minute, but some of the stuff I really coach to is on the psychological side, there's this idea of the challenger sale, where if I'm a salesperson for any industry, doesn't matter the industry, every client in that industry will likely have similar issues. And people like to have ideas in groups of three. And so if I'm sending a message to someone and trying to provide value in this message, I might say to a small business owner, financial advisor as an example, hey, I'm a financial advisor that helps people with succession planning. So many people want to get out of the industry but don't know what their business is worth. Second thing I do is retaining top talent. If I have my entire business hinged on a certain person, there's strategies that me as a financial advisor can really help you implement, retain those people. And then three, so many people have their personal assets tied up in the business. And so when it comes time to retire, they're really hinging on the sale of that business. And so how can you become more independent from that business and kind of untie that knot? And so that's a conversation that I can model to a bunch of people, right? That's a human psychological conversation of, hey, here are some issues that I know I can fix and provide value around, that now I can send that if I'm using AI and technology like LinkedIn and Dripify. LinkedIn Sales Navigator will find me the contacts, right? So I can probably find 1,000 names within my area, and Dripify will automate the outreach. And that message is what I can send to everybody. So I'm still in the human element. I'm still using psychology on how I want to outreach and the value that I'm bringing and what that message actually is. But now I'm also using AI to leverage that and reach out and scale to over 1,000 people. And so what I tend to find is that, again, those more tech savvy advisors will gravitate towards that conversation, and the people who aren't really tech savvy won't. But there's this blend where, okay, if you're not using technology or if you're not using psychology, those are the two areas that, every industry can probably benefit from a little bit more knowledge. And so it's interesting that most of my conversations are going towards the blend of both and not just, hey, are you tech savvy or not?
Yep. Well, we've seen a wave of AI adoption in financial services, from automating back office tasks to using predictive analytics for client engagement. But for many firms, the challenge isn't whether AI works or not, it's whether they're ready for it. Where are you currently exploring AI or automation within Brokerage Solutions? Is it client onboarding, compliance reviews, marketing, something else? I'm sure it's a bunch of things.
It's everything, man. We're so tech enabled that everything that we're doing, there's some kind of technology that we're leveraging. When it comes to outreach and even coaching outreach for agents, when it comes to the marketing side, right? It's all right, well, how can you leverage AI for your content calendar on social media? How do you use AI to write the post and schedule the post out for you? How do you leverage AI when it comes to automatic outreach? So like my CRM system has social media posts that you can leverage. It's got touch points that I can send and say, oh, Carl, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. It's even so granular that I could send you a text if I was allowed to. I could, schedule a task for me to call you on your birthday. I could shoot you an email. It would even allow me to do a handwritten note that it outsources to a company called Handwritten, that it'll automatically send you a handwritten note saying, hey, Carl, happy birthday from James, Brokerage Solutions. And so like the marketing outreach has been phenomenal for it. But on the flip side, when you look at like some of the admin stuff of like the onboarding and maybe contracts that we need to build, what forms are necessarily needed, any of the documentation, so much of that we've been able to build by leveraging Copilot and ChatGPT and all of the technology that we're leveraging. But the flip side too is we're using it, and I kind of touched on this a minute ago, we're using this in the actual case design as well. So when we're in a conversation with an advisor, we're leveraging our AI tools for them so that they're using our instance of Vanilla or using our instance of Income Lab, where they can use it to say, here's your most optimal tax situation. Here's the estate documents you need. Here's what you need when it comes to some of the investments that you're in, like long-term care investments and stuff. So it's all something that like we're using it for the planning, we're using it for the marketing, we're using it for the admin, so that I don't have to go out and hire 3 more people. It's something that we built it so integral into our systems and infrastructure that when we do go to hire people, it's just a matter of teaching them how to use it. And we're scaling in a way where as long as I have the systems and the technologies in place, it doesn't matter if I have 1 person or 15 people. Everything's going to be scalable going forward because of that.
Well, what's been your approach to balancing human judgment with AI-driven insights, especially in a trust-based business like wealth management?
That's a great question, man. And I think it's something that keeps me up at night a lot because it's such an important question. So much of what I coach to right now is, again, I'm a nerd when it comes to sales and psychology and all of this different stuff. And so like if I'm using any kind of AI for the prospecting, for the proactive outreach, right? Like so much of that goes back into where the social media or whatever I'm using it for, where it's going to be client facing. I reword it in my own term and then I kind of go from there. And so like as an example, I mentioned I'm writing a book, right? So I've been able to use AI to say, all right, well, give me kind of the foundational skeleton of what this chapter is going to look like. And it'll do that and it'll tell me, all right, well, you should put this stuff. And then naturally I'm like, all right, well, I'll kind of reword that. And then I'll take it a step further and I'll say, all right, well, here are some of the topics that I want to focus more on within the skeleton. And I'll kind of work that way into it as well. And so it's a matter of just the cognizance of, okay, if it's monitoring my schedule, if it's doing more of the admin stuff or pulling data off of a form, for that matter, okay, I fully trust that nowadays, and very few errors have came up because of that. But the flip side is if there's more of the human touch where I need to be more psychologically inclined with outreach, with my messaging with people, or if I'm using AI to write my content calendar for the next 3 months, I'll make sure to go in and number one, put my parameters of, hey, this is what I'm looking for. A great marketing technique for content creation on social media is, 70% of the time you need to focus on creating your own content, 20% of the time is reposting other content, and 10% of the time is that call to action of like, get on my calendar, right? Or, in an email or a phone call, I'm trying to do one of 3 things. I'm trying to, inform you, sell to you, or I'm trying to get a meeting. And 9 times out of 10, it's trying to get that meeting. Right. And so like there's some tricks in there that I can put as variables in my AI prompt to try to make sure it's within the guardrails that I want it set. But then when it actually kicks out whatever I put, I still have to go in and make sure, all right, well, ChatGPT, you kind of sucked when it came to wording this phrase, and that this doesn't sound anything like me or any stuff like that. And so I just go back in and kind of rework it to fit my own, and that might have cut my time down from 30 minutes of crafting this email down to maybe 5, where I'm like, all right, you gave me a skeleton, I can build the rest of the body from there.
Yeah, you got to make sure that it's not hallucinating with what it returns and all those kind of things. So, yeah.
I mean, ChatGPT does hallucinate, I feel like, so it's a great way to put it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, are there areas of your workflow today that are ripe for automation, but you guys haven't yet pulled the trigger on?
Not really. So again, as a millennial who considers himself very tech savvy, almost everywhere that I could implement AI, I've been implementing AI. The only thing that I wish I had the aspect to is there's a lot of great tools when it comes to automating mass texting outreach. And again, my industry is just not allowing for it. And so I would want to focus more time on there if I was allowed to. But again, we're leveraging it with social media, with proactive outreach, with planning models, and almost every area of our business right now has been touched by it. There's not many areas that I would say, okay, we should really focus more time on developing these technologies, because if there's been an opportunity, we've kind of tried to capitalize on it.
Well, how do you evaluate your AI vendors or partners to ensure that they align with your standards for security and compliance and accuracy?
That's a great question. First off, when I find a new vendor, if we're trying to implement AI, like there's a couple ways I do it. One, I type ChatGPT probably once a week and be like, hey, for my industry, what AI can I leverage? But we go to a lot of conferences as well. And so we'll see, and then I get reached out to quite a bit on LinkedIn for a potential AI opportunity and whatever technologies. So when I have a conversation, the first thing is we're cost conscious. So we look at, the cost aspect of it all. Two, we look at and have conversations around, all right, well, what is the actual impact to our business? What value is this going to bring? And are we duplicating efforts, right? I just had a conversation today with someone who is doing very similar stuff to what we're doing on vanilla. All right, well, I don't really need to duplicate those two things. Three, and I'm glad you brought up the compliance and the cybersecurity aspect, because that's something that we haven't evaluated naturally as much as we have at like the value that these companies are bringing. And so that's something that I could probably be more considerate of, is just looking into what their disclosures look like and what their cookies look like, and what if they're selling the data, which is something that would concern me for sure as well. And so there's definitely some due diligence when it comes to bringing people on. Some of the ones that we've already brought on are pretty noteworthy in the industry, like Water Lily, like Income Lab, like Vanilla. Those companies are relatively large, and so there's kind of that bias towards them anyway, because it's like, all right, well, these companies have won many awards, they're doing great work. Naturally, I'll kind of assume that they have better cybersecurity, but if there's one that's more niche that I'm not as familiar with, it's a matter of just diving in and, well, where does the money go? Like if it's only $100 and this thing's providing $1,000 worth of value to my business, there's probably some selling going on for their practices. Hopefully they're also doing good work when it comes to protecting their own domains and everything like that. There's just conversations necessarily to be had with those vendors that we're trying to work with for sure.
Well, even the most successful firms have hidden friction or processes that are good enough to work but slow enough to limit scale. And identifying and addressing those gaps is where the transformation really happens. If you had to pinpoint your biggest operational challenge right now, what would it be? Is it talent? Is it process bottlenecks? Is it technology limitations? Or I'm sure there's something.
Yeah, no, there's two things. Transparently, man, the first thing is talent. We have a couple people who aren't as ingrained in the industry. They're coming from a different industry, and so it's a matter of coaching them and helping them understand the industry more and how to target this type of client. And so there's been a lot of bottlenecks there that take up time and build it. Any startup, and again, we're more of a startup anyway, any startup has that same limitation where, well, we need to build the infrastructure and we need to build repeatable systems that can help us grow and scale. And part of that is how can I coach some of my team members and teammates to be more ingrained within the industry and how to talk the talk with this type of a client. The second thing is capital. Because again, we're a startup, we have a lot of great momentum. And so that's something that I'm very appreciative of, but we are needing to be cost conscious on almost everything. And so it's a matter of, all right, how can I build value for my end client? How can I build value for the people that we're targeting while still doing it in a way where we're not breaking the bank? And so again, that's one of the areas of why we've gone so far on the deep end for AI and technology is because it's allowed me the ability to scale without having to get extra overhead by hiring on 3 more people. I'm doing the work of, a 5-person team when half of it's being done right now through the different tech platforms that we've been leveraging. And so that's probably the 2 biggest issues is again, the cost consciousness and then the talent aspect. But and the fact that we're building from scratch. But at the end of the day, it's something that I'm happy that we're doing it this way, because it's showing a lot of great benefits to how we can leverage the technologies that we've been given.
Well, how do you measure operational efficiency, and what metrics matter most to you in determining whether a process needs to change or not?
It always goes back to how it's impacting my end client, right? So for my financial advisor, it's how long did it take someone to get back to them, or how many minutes were they on hold, or hey, if they ask for an illustration from us, did it take me a day or did it take me 2 weeks to get back to them? And so I think some of those aspects are going to be the most important. What does the timeline look like for the actual end client? Because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are keeping our business afloat. And so that's my overall answer is how can we look at operational efficiencies when it comes to the end client itself?
Well, have you had to make any significant tech stack decisions recently? And if you have, how did you approach balancing the cost with capabilities? Because I know you said you guys are obviously you're a startup and you're very mindful of cost and all that. So I certainly understand that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. We've had to make a lot of decisions around tech recently. So the most notable is leveraging technology for our competitive advantages. And again, the main competitive advantages that we have now are our partnerships with Vanilla and Water Lily and Income Lab and Holistiplan. When you look at those, there's a bunch of newer technologies that are coming out in those same 5 categories. And we're looking at it from the standpoint of number one, what's the most important aspect of who their audience typically looks like. So if this is a competitive advantage, is this something that I can bring to an insurance agent as much as I can bring it to, a more financially savvy, or can I scale it back and forward? That's one of the key aspects. Second thing is this actually going to provide value to my advisor? And is there any other technologies that are doing the same thing that might do it cheaper as well? Or maybe it gives more robust benefit. And the most notable example, and this is not a dig on any company in particular, but we were looking at Water Lily versus High. High Peak does something very similar where they send you, a list of questions that your client will answer, and it'll forecast the long-term care conversation. And it was great. It was a great technology. But then we did a meeting with Water Lily and we were like, holy cow, this is so much more robust. Like it had the same amount of data points. So we knew the information was very valid. The second standpoint was that I could overlay quotes and illustrations in Water Lily. I couldn't do that in High Peak. And so it made it a much easier conversation when it came to my end client, right? You're not just trying to make an association, which was what you would have to do for High Peak. You'd still have to sell the product to the client, right? But the Water Lily will sell it for you essentially of here's your one pagers that you can give us to your client on how a long-term care policy might help, or how a long-term care policy might be implemented into a portfolio. Here's the return on investment. Here's the one pager. And it was also cheaper. And so when it comes to that, it's just a matter of we actually have to look at, are there competitors in your landscape? One of the common questions I ask, and it's not, again, as a dig on any one competitor, but I'll ask in a conversation, who are your top competitors, right? And I'll do my due diligence and research them. Are they more cost effective? Are they providing more value? What does the benefit look like, right? And there's been a number of times I've had that benefit in a conversation where I was talking to someone from Asset Map, and they do something very similar to Income Lab, but it's more expensive and not as robust. And so I'm like, all right, well, I'm glad I had that question because now I know Income Lab a little bit more, and that's a more robust platform that's cheaper. And so just getting to know some of their competitors, even if they don't give me competitors, it's still something that, not to be overly reliant on ChatGPT, but I can go in and say, all right, well, tell me, if I'm looking at this particular technology, who are the top competitors in that space? And really I can reduce down the number of names based on that conversation, and then I can go in and have that conversation with the vendor and say, all right, well, tell me more about your process and tell me what about the pricing. And so it's definitely helped me vet, even though these other companies are phenomenal, it just that some of them didn't really fit the mold that we were trying to build around. And so that's kind of where we've been able to reduce some of the vendors that we're working with in the tech space.
Gotcha. Well, where have you seen some of the biggest ROI from operational changes you guys have made?
Biggest is as soon as we started implementing some of the tech stack that we're talking about, the Vanilla, the Income Lab, the Water Lily and stuff, like we've gotten so many illustrations and so many sales actually from those conversations because, again, so many of my type of industry, the BGA, the brokerage general agency world, there's so many people in our space that, they went golfing with some guy 10 years ago, and so now they're still doing business, and that's great. But at the end of the day, relationship can only take you so far. It's a matter of how do you implement value and how do you communicate that value and how can you get your client to see that value. And so I bring that all up because as soon as we started focusing on some of those competitive advantages, it's gotten me away from the conversation of, hey, we went golfing together, do business with me, which again is where the industry is, to here are some tangible insights that you can actually provide to your client that will actually impact your bottom line. And so because of that,
Mhm.
it's impacted our bottom line as well.
Well, I know you know this, but the financial services industry is kind of in a unique position, right? So market conditions, client expectations, technology capabilities are all shifting at once. And that creates a lot of risk and a lot of opportunity. So when you think about the next 3 to 5 years, what's the biggest opportunity you see for Brokerage Solutions in your advisor network?
I think the most important or the biggest opportunities we have is one that we're already tech enabled because again, I think you'll continue to see the tech implementation within our industry. The second aspect I think is again our mentality of looking at the holistic financial plan as opposed to the more transactional business of, hey, I sold you an insurance and now I get a commission. That's something that I think will benefit us because I think overall the industry is also heading towards holistic planning and providing a value. And so the fact that those are two of our main mantras in conversation, I think will highly benefit us. And now it's just a matter of, again, the timing of it all. We're already seeing a ton of early momentum because of these exact conversations. But the flip side is it's something that if you look at us in 5 years, those two main things, the tech enablement and the value, that we're bringing are going to be the two things that will propel us into future success as well.
Well, I think I know what you're going to say with the next one because we've talked about relationships a little bit, but do you see expansion coming more from deepening existing relationships or entering new markets and channels going forward?
I think, I mean, to your point, actually, we're still working on getting as many relationships as we can. And so we're still breaking into the various industries. My main background is with broker dealer advisors who have worked historically with larger firms. And so like I can continue to deepen those relationships and there's a lot of impact in there as well. But the flip side is that there's a lot of insurance agents who need our type of business. There's a lot of RIAs, the more financially savvy people who are doing our type of business. And so from that standpoint, we're kind of breaking into those markets a little bit more. But at the end of the day, it's just a matter of how can I leverage the relationships I have and how can I garner more people from that. And so when I coach people towards, sales and prospecting on all that different stuff, 20% of the time should be fishing for new people and proactive outreach. 80% of the time should be servicing your existing people. And you kind of have to scale that up and down based on where you are in your industry. So like right now, we're probably closer to like 40% servicing and 60% new business. And my hope is to get to that 80%, 20%. And that's when you've really came into a more mature company, I think.
Well, you guys have spent a lot of time picking technology platforms to improve your efficiency and all those kind of things and give you guys a step up from everybody else. So, kind of sticking in that same vein, what technology capabilities do you think will become table stakes for firms in your sector going forward?
That's a good question. I think really, again, it's the planning technologies, planning and stuff that's helping people dive into the holistic planning approach. I think will continue to be integral in our conversation. But then the other thing is that so many advisors that we talk to, right, are having that issue of prospecting and finding new clients as well. And so if I really had to pinpoint the two technologies that I think will propel everybody forward is, again, one, the planning software towards the holistic approach, but two, is stuff like LinkedIn Sales Navigator, like Dripify, like Zoom Info, which has a great AI tool as well. So many of that stuff will help people actually find more clients and have more engaging conversations, I think. And that's the two things that, the planning software and the lead gen software will help with is, again, finding those clients and having better conversations.
Well, being in this space, I have to ask this question, and I kind of do this with all my guests. But if you had a fractional CIO or AI advisor embedded in your leadership team, where would you deploy them first?
Competitive advantages would be one, like helping us uncover what technology we should need and implement that will help us stand out within the industry. I think that's pillar number one because we are a startup. Two, and I think this is fair for everybody, is the operational efficiency side of how am I leveraging AI when it comes to onboarding people, maintaining relationships, and the entire process and systems overflow that we were kind of talking about. And so I think everybody should have someone who's versed in technology and who's constantly looking at newer technologies. But those are the two that we would probably be focusing on is, again, hey, help us with our competitive advantages, and then two, operational efficiency.
Makes perfect sense. Well, where can listeners learn more about Brokerage Solutions and connect with you?
Yeah, James Mills, MBA, CRPC, that's on LinkedIn. And then the other side is brokeragesolutions.com. Those are the two best ways to get in touch with us. But definitely LinkedIn. I use that probably every day, 15 times a day. So if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, there's a guarantee that I'm going to end up listening and probably reaching out.
Gotcha. Well, what's one piece of advice you'd give to other leaders looking to modernize without losing the personal touch in a relationship-driven industry?
I have a long-winded answer and I have a short answer, so I'll keep it short. But again, when it comes to the modernizing it, just keep your ears open and don't be bashful to ask questions. And actually listen when someone reaches out on LinkedIn. Don't just shoot them down and say, "Hey, I don't want to hear you out." Because so many of the great conversations that I've had, even especially recently, is they came from a random connection point on LinkedIn, and then I heard them out and like, this is actually really cool. I think I could implement you. So just being open-minded, I think, is going to be important, not only for the modernizing aspect, but it'll also help you be more adaptable when it comes to your industry overall.
Well, James, thanks for sharing your perspective and giving us a behind-the-scenes look at how you're navigating both tradition and transformation in financial services. For our listeners, if today's episode got you thinking about scaling your tech, improving data readiness, or exploring AI without the hype, let's connect. Visit Protelligent.com or find me on LinkedIn. Until next time, ask better questions, build smarter systems, and stay on the edge of intelligence. Thanks, James. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Carl.